You ever notice how your parents or grandparents will call customer service and actually stay on the line for 40 minutes just to dispute a $3 charge? Or how they'll print out driving directions even though their phone has GPS? There's this moment where you think, why are they like this? But here's the thing. It's not stubborn. It's not old-fashioned. It's actually a psychological blueprint that was hardwired into an entire generation, and understanding it changes everything about how we see them, and honestly, how we see ourselves. Baby boomers, born between 1946 and 1964, aren't just another demographic slice. They're the psychological aftermath of the biggest war the world had ever seen. Their parents came home from World War II with trauma they never talked about, into an economy that was booming but emotionally bankrupt. And so the boomers grew up in this weird paradox, material abundance mixed with emotional scarcity. That combination, it created a very specific kind of mind. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're 6 years old in 1956. Your dad works at the factory, comes home at 5:30, doesn't talk much. Your mom makes dinner, keeps the house perfect, smiles through everything. No one's discussing feelings. No one's asking, how was your day emotionally? You're rewarded for being seen and not heard. You're praised for independence, for toughness, for not needing help. So what does your brain learn? That value comes from what you do, not who you are. That you earn love through performance. That asking for help is weakness. This is the psychology of self-reliance as survival, and it's stuck. Boomers became the generation that doesn't ask for directions, doesn't go to therapy unless it's life or death, doesn't admit when they're struggling. Not because they're prideful, well, not just because of that, but because their entire developmental years taught them that independence equals safety. Psychologists call this an external locus of identity. Your worth isn't internal. It's tied to your job, your house, your ability to provide, to fix things, to not be a burden. Now, let's talk about loyalty. Boomers are famous for staying at the same job for 30 years, for brand loyalty that makes no logical sense. Like your uncle will only buy Ford trucks even though his last 3 broke down. Why? Because their formative years were all about stability after chaos. Their parents had lived through the Depression and a world war. The message was clear. Find something solid and hold on tight. So they did. They married young, worked the same job, lived in the same town. It wasn't lack of imagination. It was a psychological anchor in a world that had recently been on fire. But here's where it gets really interesting. Boomers were also the first generation raised with television. They watched the moon landing, the Vietnam War, the civil rights movement, all in their living rooms. They saw the world change in real time, and it created this psychological split. On one hand, they were told to conform, to follow the rules, to trust authority. On the other hand, they watched authority lie about war, watched institutions crumble, watched their peers protest in the streets. So you get this generation that simultaneously craves order and deeply distrusts it. They want things done the right way, but they also question everything. It's a contradiction that lives in their nervous system. And let's talk about optimism. Boomers are wildly, almost irrationally optimistic. They believe things will work out because, in their experience, they did. They grew up in the longest economic expansion in American history. Houses were affordable, jobs were abundant. If you worked hard, you got rewarded. That's not naivety, that's operant conditioning. Their brains were literally wired by an environment that reinforced effort with outcome. So when they tell you to just work harder, they're not being dismissive. They're offering you the only formula that ever made sense to them. But that same optimism, it also created a blind spot, because boomers often struggle to see systems as broken. If the system worked for them and you're struggling, their brain defaults to, you must not be working hard enough. It's not cruelty, it's cognitive consistency. Their life experience taught them that effort equals success. So when that equation doesn't hold, it doesn't compute. And instead of questioning the system, they question the individual. It's a defense mechanism, really, because if the system is broken, then maybe their success wasn't entirely earned, and that's too destabilizing to consider. There's also this thing about communication. Boomers will call you instead of texting because to them, connection is voice, it's presence. They grew up in an era when long-distance phone calls were expensive, so if someone called, it mattered. A phone call meant urgency, meant care. Texting feels flimsy to them, impersonal. And when they leave you a voicemail that's 2 minutes long and ends with "call me back," they're not being inefficient, they're trying to connect the way their brain learned connection happens, through real-time, back-and-forth human sound. So, where does all this leave us? Understanding the psychology of baby boomers isn't about excusing frustrating behaviors or pretending generational differences don't exist. It's about seeing that every generation is shaped by the world they grew up in, and that world imprints itself on the brain in ways we don't always see. Boomers aren't resistant to change because they're stubborn. They're resistant because change, for them, has always come with loss. They're not obsessed with work because they're workaholics. They're obsessed because work gave them identity when nothing else did. And here's the shift. If you're a boomer watching this, maybe this is permission to soften a little, to realize that your worth isn't just what you produce, that asking for help isn't failure, that the world your kids and grandkids are navigating isn't the one you mastered, and that's okay. And if you're from a younger generation, maybe this is a reminder that the people who raised you weren't trying to be difficult. They were just trying to survive with the psychological tools they were given. We're all just walking around with the invisible architecture of our childhoods, trying to make sense of a world that keeps changing faster than our brains can update. And maybe, just maybe, a little empathy for that makes all of us a little more human. If this clicked for you, let me know in the comments. And if you want more psychology that actually makes sense of the people around you, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.